Today we uncover the shocking truth about UK fish. There was a time in this country when you went to the fishmonger for fish. The person behind that counter knew which boat it came off, which harbour it landed at, and roughly how many hours had passed since it was caught. Supermarkets spent years quietly removing those people from our lives. The skilled fish counter is gone. In many Tesco stores, it's been replaced by a sushi rail that barely anyone uses, while the person who used to guide you to the freshest catch now works somewhere else in the building entirely. And now people have reported that their own cats won't even touch certain supermarket fish anymore. They walk up to it, sniff it, and simply leave. And some people who live right on the British coast reported that they put supermarket prawns out on their bird table. Seagulls, birds that will eat absolutely anything, wouldn't touch them. They sat there for days, shriveling, like an abandoned McDonald's cheeseburger. So ask yourself, just how did we get to this point? To the point where our food is now stuff our pets or even wildlife will refuse to eat. We know how this feels. You pick up something you've trusted for years and realize you don't actually know what's in it anymore. That's not being paranoid. These days, it's just a completely reasonable response to what's been happening. Consider this. When do you think was the last time you ate an actual pink salmon? Because here's something the supermarkets aren't in any hurry to tell you. Farmed salmon flesh is a stale grey, not pale pink, not light coral, grey, sort of like those new-build houses. They've been drained of all colour. Why? Because they're being fed on a lovely diet of grain and soy pellets, of course, meaning they lack the natural variety of carotenoids in their diet to produce that organic pink shade. So what about that vivid bright orange you see on the shelf? That's a synthetic compound added specifically to change the colour of the flesh before it reaches you. Without it, the fish stays grayscale, and people instinctively avoid it. So they cleverly add the dye and print rich in colour on the front of the pack. So how did we get to a point where even the colour of a fish has become artificial? You don't even know when's the last time you had an actual real pink salmon, because for all you know, you could have been eating pink-dyed fish for the past decade. So we've gone through the major fish products sold in UK supermarkets, and we'll expose 13 that you definitely need to be avoiding. Then we'll tell you about 7 good alternatives that are genuinely still worth buying. But first, if this video shocks you, please hit that hype button right now. Every hype pushes it in front of someone who hasn't seen it yet, and the more people who see it, the harder it becomes for these companies to keep going the way they have been. You're not just watching a video, you're part of something that genuinely matters. Hype it, share it with someone you care about, subscribe because we're not stopping here. And let's get into it. Number 13. Farmed Scottish salmon. If there's one fish product that represents everything that's gone wrong with what we're sold in British supermarkets, it's this. Farmed salmon is now the most consumed fish in the United Kingdom, outselling everything else on the chiller. And the reality of how it gets to your plate is nowhere near what the packaging implies. According to published data, Scottish salmon farms have been legally permitted to apply formaldehyde, the same chemical used in the embalming process, directly into the sea loch water where your salmon lives. Between 2020 and 2023, it was applied on Scottish farms 194 times. The number of farms using it quadrupled over that period. This isn't improving, it's getting worse. Sea lice infestations across these farms are completely out of hand. A single farm can harbour up to 5 million sea lice at any one time. The pesticide used to treat them takes over 400 days to break down in the marine environment, and studies have found it reduces crustacean populations by 83% in surrounding waters. Despite this, regulators raised the permitted safety limit for this chemical 23 times, largely under pressure from the industry. On welfare, 1 in 4 farmed salmon doesn't survive to harvest. And no, that wasn't a typo. Out of every 4 fish in this farm, 1 doesn't make it. That's the industry average. And yet, farms with mortality rates approaching 74% have retained both their ASC certification and their RSPCA assured label. The ASC itself raised its own permitted sea lice limit by up to 1,550% in 2021. When undercover footage emerged from a farm on the Isle of Skye supplying Tesco finest, at the time, the Green Britain Foundation publicly called the site a crime scene. 170,000 fish had reportedly perished there in a single week, and harvesting reportedly continued throughout. Is this what you would call a farm? Or is it something else entirely? Until 2023, packs of farmed salmon were legally required to say the word farmed on the label. The salmon industry successfully lobbied to have that word removed. If you notice now, all the packs just say Scottish salmon instead of Scottish farmed salmon. Has this been done to deliberately misguide the British public? Is there even another reason for this change? On the other foot, M&S sell their farmed salmon under the name Loch Muir, which was revealed back in 2006 to be a completely fictional place, invented by a marketing team. There is no such loch. And if you're considering organic farmed salmon as the answer, you guessed it. Independent analysis found almost no measurable difference in sea lice levels or mortality rates between organic and conventional Scottish farms. One organic farm reported a mortality rate of over 86% in a single month in 2024. That means in a batch of 100 fish, only 14 make it to harvest. Scientists who studied carcinogenic compound levels in farmed Atlantic salmon concluded that people should eat it no more than once every 2 months. Norwegian farmed salmon isn't an escape route either. The world's largest salmon farming company is Norwegian. Same open net sea cages, same grey flesh dyed pink, same chemical treatments. A different flag. The same product. Number 12. Supermarket smoked fish. Smoked salmon, smoked haddock, smoked mackerel. The word smoked sounds like craft. It suggests someone took time and care over your food. In many cases, that's not what you're getting at all. Traditional smoked haddock done properly was cold smoked over oak sawdust for hours in dedicated smokehouses, the kind that made Grimsby famous. Today, much of what's in the supermarket chiller was produced in a fraction of that time using liquid brine injections and chemical smoke flavoring to speed the process up. That distinctive yellow color on supermarket smoked haddock, in many cases it comes from food dyes, including tartrazine and annatto, not from genuine long smoking. The color is artificial. The tradition isn't there. Here's the angle on smoked fish that most people haven't considered. Smoking is also one of the most effective ways to disguise fish that isn't particularly fresh. The type that you would bin the second you opened the packet. A strong smoke flavor can mask things that would be immediately obvious in an unsmoked fillet. You simply can't tell. As a general rule of thumb, avoid all smoked fish unless you can be sure it's the real deal. Between 2020 and 2023, there was a listeria outbreak in the United Kingdom linked to smoked salmon. Several of those affected were very seriously harmed. Public Health England advises that vulnerable groups, including pregnant women and elderly people, should avoid ready-to-eat smoked fish unless it's been reheated until steaming hot all the way through. Of course, if you have to cook your smoked salmon until it's steaming before it's safe, you've rather defeated the point of buying it. Number 11. John West Prince's and Own Brand Tinned Tuna Multi-Packs. Tinned tuna is in practically every British kitchen cupboard. It's the trusted standby that most people buy without thinking. Which is exactly why this matters. The UK has been assessed as having one of the highest fish mislabeling rates of any developed country, with some analyses suggesting more than half of fish sold here isn't what the label says. For cheap tinned tuna multi-packs, this creates a specific problem with mercury. Most tins claim to contain skipjack tuna, which carries lower mercury levels than larger species. But if what's actually in the tin is yellowfin or big-eye tuna, you're consuming significantly more mercury than you thought. Testing has found that 90% of tuna samples contained methyl mercury, and the NHS specifically advises pregnant women and young children to limit tuna consumption because of this risk. Greenpeace ranked Prince's at the very bottom of their Sustainable Tuna League table. Their cheap multipacks rely heavily on FAD fishing, fish aggregating devices, large floating structures that attract tuna, but also trap sharks, rays, and sea turtles as bycatch. Only around a quarter of their tuna comes from lower-impact pole and line methods. John West publicly pledged in 2011 that 100% of their tuna would be sustainably sourced by 2016. When 2015 arrived, with just a year left to go before their own stated deadline, they'd achieved 2%, not 20, not 10. 2, so 98% was still being caught using the same methods they'd promised to move away from. The consequences they faced were essentially none, and might just be the reason they didn't even bother to try. Number 10. Budget breaded fish fillets from Tesco, Asda, Morrisons, and Iceland. In 2016, a British shopper bought a pack of sealed breaded haddock from Morrisons, took it home, opened the packet, and found a 5cm anisakis worm wriggling around inside, alive. These are roundworm parasites that naturally occur in wild fish, and are normally rendered harmless through proper freezing at -20 degrees Celsius for at least 24 hours. The fact that this one was still alive in a sealed ready-to-cook product asks a very specific question about quality control in budget fish processing. That's just the dramatic end of the story. Even setting parasites aside, industry testing found that 17 out of 61 frozen fish products contained 50% or less actual fish. You're paying for a fish product where more than half the weight is water, and stabilizers, batter, and breadcrumbs. When you fry some of these products, they release a distinctive foamy white liquid. That's the water retention agents inside the fish releasing during cooking. You're not really frying fish, you're boiling your fish in the stabilizers and hoping there's something underneath. The fish content itself is frequently listed on the label simply as white fish, a legal catch-all term that in many budget products means industrially processed Alaskan pollock pressed into giant frozen blocks at sea, cut into uniform portions and coated in enough batter to give the impression of a substantial product. It's not dangerous exactly, but it's very far from what the front of the pack suggests. Number 9. Supermarket cooked king prawns from Tesco and Aldi. The large pink prawns sitting on ice at the supermarket fish counter look like a weekend luxury. In reality, almost all of them are warm water prawns that have been flown in from industrial farm operations in Southeast Asia or South America, and the story of how they reach you involves multiple things worth knowing. Warm water prawn farming has been closely associated with the clearing of mangrove forests, some of the most carbon-dense ecosystems on the planet. A fifth of the world's mangrove forests have been lost since 1980, and the prawn farming industry is a significant factor in that. Before these prawns are shipped, they're typically treated with sodium metabisulfite, a chemical that prevents the heads from turning black during the long transit. They're then frozen, transported across the globe, defrosted at a UK distribution centre, and placed on ice at the fish counter under the word fresh. The Guardian newspaper conducted a 6-month undercover investigation into the supply chains behind own-brand warm water prawns sold in British supermarkets. What they uncovered was that these chains led back to Thai fishing boats, where men had reportedly been bought and sold for as little as £250, forced to work 20-hour shifts in conditions the investigation described in deeply troubling terms. The story ran with evidence, witness testimony, and video, and according to reporting at the time, not a single major British supermarket pulled those prawns from their shelves afterwards, not one. We mentioned at the start that someone living on the British coast put defrosted supermarket prawns on their bird table, and seagulls wouldn't touch them. They sat there for days, shriveling to nothing. That's the product we're talking about. Number 8. Supermarket seafood sticks. Seafood sticks sit in the refrigerator aisle looking like a casual, healthy protein option. A bit of crab for your salad or your sandwich. There's no crab in them. None at all. What's in them is surimi, which is made from cheap white fish, usually Alaskan pollock or hake, that's been mechanically separated, bleached, washed multiple times, and pressed into a rubbery paste. That paste is mixed with starches, sugar, MSG, and artificial flavorings designed to approximate the taste of seafood. Then a strip of orange or red food coloring is applied down one side to make it look vaguely crab-like. In some products, that coloring is carmine, derived from crushed cochineal insects. In some versions, actual fish content is as low as 40% of the stick. The rest is filler, binders, salt, and chemical flavoring. Some of these packs include labeling warning they may contain fish. May contain fish. Fish is theoretically the main ingredient. But supply chains behind these products have become so complex and so poorly monitored that retailers genuinely can't fully confirm what's in there at any given moment. That may contain fish warning isn't there to protect people with allergies. It's there because they genuinely aren't sure. Nutritionally, surimi-based seafood sticks deliver less than half the protein of real crab, significantly more carbohydrates, and considerably more sodium. You're not getting a budget version of a nutritious seafood product. You're getting an industrially manufactured substitute that has almost nothing in common with what it claims to be. Number 7. Tinned mackerel in tomato sauce from Asda and Morrison's. There's an entire generation of British people who grew up eating tinned mackerel on toast as one of the healthiest, cheapest, and most reliably sustainable choices on the shelf. Mackerel used to be almost a given, plentiful off British shores, rich in omega-3 consistently on the safe-to-eat lists. That's no longer the situation. The Marine Conservation Society has placed Atlantic mackerel on its red avoid list. The reason comes down to a failure of international governance. The scientific body that monitors these stocks recommended that North Atlantic mackerel catches be reduced by 70% to allow populations to recover. The coastal nations involved, including the UK, Norway, and the EU, looked at that recommendation and settled instead on a 48% cut, well below what the science says is needed. Waitrose became the first British supermarket to respond to this seriously, announcing in February 2026 that they were suspending mackerel sourcing entirely until the fish meets their responsible sourcing standards again. No other major supermarket has followed. So when you pick up tinned mackerel in tomato sauce from Asda or Morrison's, you're buying a fish whose sustainability status has been officially compromised by political decisions made well above any individual consumer's head, and sold by companies who've decided that carries on regardless. Number 6. Plain Basa fillets from Aldi and Tesco. If you've ever bought cheap frozen white fish fillets labeled Basa and had a gut instinct that something was off, that instinct was doing its job correctly. Basa, also sold as pangasius or river cobbler, is farmed intensively in the Mekong River Delta in Vietnam, one of the most heavily polluted river systems in the world. The European Parliament has raised official safety concerns about Basa being exposed to heavy metals, plastics, and pesticide residues in its farming environment. Testing has found that around 45% of Basa samples showed antibiotic resistance to key medications. The fish are raised in such densely packed conditions that heavy antibiotic use is considered routine just to keep them alive in those waters. Over 30% of imported farmed Asian seafood is rejected at US ports specifically because of contamination and unsafe drug residues. Around 18% of Vietnamese Basa processing facilities tested were found to have E. coli contamination in the water used to wash the fish. Before packaging, nearly 1 in 5 facilities washing your dinner in compromised water. Then there's the weight. These fillets are routinely injected with chemical polyphosphates that force the fish cells to retain water, artificially inflating the weight, and therefore the price you pay. When you defrost and cook them, that water releases. The fillet shrinks dramatically in the pan. You're paying for a product where a significant chunk of what you weigh on the scales is tap water held in place by chemicals. Multiple major Italian retail chains have banned Basa entirely from their stores. When a country with that level of seafood culture won't stock it, that carries some weight. Number 5. Supermarket sushi from Tesco and Sainsbury's. Supermarket sushi seems clean and simple: fresh fish, rice, seaweed, a healthy quick lunch. In 2016, multiple British customers reported finding visible, live anisakis parasitic worms inside sealed supermarket sushi containers, not dead, moving. These roundworm parasites naturally occur in wild fish and can cause significant internal harm if eaten alive. The standard method for neutralizing them is freezing the fish at -20°C for at least 24 hours before it's served raw. That's the requirement. The question is whether it's being consistently followed in mass production conditions. Here's the specific problem with supermarket sushi. The term sushi grade, which you'll see on the packaging, is entirely unregulated in this country. There is no legal definition for it. No government body certifies it. No independent organization checks it. Any retailer can put sushi grade on any fish without a single verification from anyone. It's a marketing phrase dressed up to sound like a standard. When you pick up that £3 meal deal sushi from Tesco or Sainsbury's, you're trusting that the fish was frozen correctly, handled correctly, and that quality control caught anything that should have been caught before sealing. Based on what customers reported in 2016, that trust isn't always justified. The product that looks like the most convenient, innocent option in the chiller requires the most rigorous handling of anything in the entire fish aisle. Number 4. Supermarket fish pie ready meals from Tesco, Sainsbury's, and Asda. Fish pie is genuine, British comfort food. It should be generous, wholesome, and led by actual fish. What supermarket ready meal fish pies deliver is a considerably different proposition. One major British retailer's fish pie was found to contain just 20% actual fish. The other 80% was mashed potato, cream, and cheap fillers. Customers who raised this online put it plainly: there should be fish in a fish pie. And this one essentially didn't have any. Even in slightly more premium versions, the nutritional profile tells the real story. A Tesco Finest fish pie runs at around 510 calories per pack, over 23 grams of fat, 11 grams of saturates, and nearly 2 grams of salt. That's not a high-protein meal built around nutritious fish. That's a vehicle for delivering salty cream and potato in a cardboard sleeve with a fish on the front. Some brands add food dyes, annatto and curcumin, to make the small amount of fish actually present look more appealing and premium in the sauce. The salmon pictured prominently on the packaging and the fish you find when you open the lid are living very different existences. When you add up the raw cost of the actual ingredients, a small amount of fish trimmings, some potatoes, a splash of milk and cream, you're paying £4 to £6 for a product whose materials are worth roughly 50p. The rest is packaging, marketing and margin. Number 3. Young's Chip Shop Large Cod Fillets and Non-MC Budget Cod from Iceland and Lidl. Cod is the most iconic fish in British food culture. Fish and chips, battered cod from the chippy. It's woven into who we are as a nation. So it matters considerably that North Sea cod was re-added to the Marine Conservation Society's Red Avoid list in 2019, after a brief recovery period, and has stayed there. The way most of this cod is caught makes the situation worse. Bottom trawling involves dragging heavy-weighted nets along the seabed to sweep up fish. Think of it like this. It's the equivalent of ploughing an entire ancient forest to catch one deer. Those nets destroy centuries-old coral structures, wipe out spawning grounds, and take everything in their path without discrimination. Budget cod from Iceland and Lidl without MSC certification exists in completely unmonitored territory. No independent oversight of stock levels, no verified quota enforcement, no check on the methods used to catch what ends up in your freezer. Young's positioned their chip shop range as the definitive British pub-style cod experience. In practice, because British cod stocks are under such sustained pressure, these brands have increasingly had to source from distant Arctic waters. The fish under all that industrial batter is thinner and has travelled considerably further to get to your plate than the packaging implies. The batter isn't just texture and flavour, it's also doing significant structural work hiding what's underneath it. Number 2. Young's Popcorn Scampi Bites. Scampi used to mean something specific and genuinely good. A basket of whole, sweet langoustine tails from British waters, lightly dusted and simply fried. That's what British scampi was. So when Young's Popcorn Scampi Bites positions itself as a fun, snackable version of that pub classic, it's invoking a tradition the product has very little actual connection to. Flip the packet over and look at the ingredients. The actual scampi content is 9%. 9. The rest includes 23% generic minced whitefish. Fish of various species that's been mechanically separated and pressed together as filler, along with oat fiber, water-binding agents, and a heavy outer coating of breadcrumbs that constitutes a significant portion of every single bite. Langoustine stocks in British waters are under serious, sustained pressure. The primary catching method is bottom trawling, the same seabed damaging approach we covered with cod. So the 9% actual scampi that does make it in arrives with its own set of environmental concerns, and they charge pub snack prices for it. What you're eating is primarily a paste, a machine-mashed, stabilizer-bound, breadcrumb-coated paste with a single-digit percentage of the ingredient it's named after. Scampi, 9%. Number 1. Supermarket sea bass. We've saved this one for last because it's the most recently uncovered and because it connects the fish on your plate to a supply chain that reaches further than most people would ever imagine standing at a fish counter. A joint investigation by De Smog and The Guardian, published in May 2025, traced the sea bass sold in British supermarkets back to its actual source. What they found is that Turkey now accounts for approximately 85% of the UK's farmed sea bass imports. A single Turkish fish farming company, Kaliç Deniz, was confirmed to be directly supplying sea bass to Waitrose, Co-op, Lidl, Aldi and Asda. The same wholesalers who handle Kaliç farmed fish also supplied M&S, Morrisons, Sainsbury's and Tesco, though those retailers declined to confirm whether the fish came specifically from Kaliç or another source. These Turkish farms feed their sea bass using fish meals sourced from Senegalese waters off the west coast of Africa. Senegal received an EU yellow card for illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing in May 2024. According to the investigation, 57% of fish populations in Senegalese waters are already in a state of collapse. What ends up inside a fish that's been raised in intensively farmed conditions in Turkish coastal waters, in pens that are, according to people inside that industry, deliberately kept opaque? Chemical treatments are used. The environmental conditions around those farms are documented as poor, and given that the supply chain is described as guarded like a state secret, independent verification of what those fish are actually exposed to during their lives is extremely limited. You're largely using blind trust if you choose this option. You're taking the producer's word for it and the producer isn't particularly interested in being asked. The communities in Senegal who've depended on these fish, particularly sardinella, as their primary protein and their livelihood for generations, are being systematically priced out of their own waters. Since a fish meal factory opened in the region in 2011, the local cost of dried sardinella went up by 8 times. In 2023, the resulting food insecurity pushed Senegal into crisis-level hunger. People in one of the world's most food-vulnerable regions are going without, partly so that British supermarkets can keep sea bass trays competitively priced. Over 500,000 fillets produced within this supply chain arrived on British supermarket shelves in 2024 alone. The sea bass farms in southwestern Turkey are simultaneously polluting local protected seagrass meadows. The supply chain itself is described by those inside the Turkish aquaculture industry as guarded like a state secret, and every single one of those 500,000 fillets was labelled responsibly sourced. As for fish sole, particularly about frozen sole fillets from places like Iceland, genuine Dover sole and lemon sole are actually clean, well-regarded fish. The problem is that what's sold as sole in budget supermarket freezer sections often isn't. The UK's high fish mislabeling rates mean that cheaper flatfish species are routinely sold under more desirable names. If the label doesn't specify the exact species and carry an MSC certification, there's a reasonable chance the sole you're buying isn't quite what the label says it is. Before we get to what's actually still worth buying, let's take a minute to focus on the labels themselves, because the fish aisle is full of language designed to reassure you without actually telling you anything meaningful. If a salmon label says Atlantic salmon, it's farmed. Always. Wild Atlantic salmon is essentially commercially gone from British waters. There is no wild Atlantic salmon on any supermarket shelf anywhere in this country. So when you see the word Atlantic, you already know everything you need to know. Scottish salmon means farmed too. As we said earlier, until 2023, those packs had to include the word farmed by law. The industry successfully lobbied to have that word removed. They didn't do that because the fish got better. Responsibly sourced with no accompanying third-party logo means the supermarket wrote those words themselves and printed them on their own packaging. No independent body verified it. No law required it to mean anything. It's a marketing phrase, not a standard. The Aqua Green certification you'll see on farmed salmon has been significantly weakened under sustained industry pressure. A wild fish investigation found 5 out of 6 ASC-certified Scottish salmon farms were averaging sea lice counts 8 times above the ASC's own permitted limit. Every single one of them kept their certification. RSPCA Assured on farmed fish has the same problem. Farms where 3 out of 4 fish don't reach harvest have kept this label. It focuses primarily on how the fish is treated at the very end, not on how it lived. And Soil Association Organic Certification for farmed salmon, the Soil Association themselves have publicly acknowledged the standard isn't delivering the outcomes they intended. Here's what actually helps you. If you see the words Pacific, Sockeye, Pink, Cater, or Coho on a salmon label, that's wild caught. That's the genuinely good stuff. And the MSC blue tick, the small blue fish logo, is still the most trustworthy label in the shop for wild-caught fish. It's independently audited, and it means something real. On fresh versus frozen, wild fish that's frozen at sea within hours of being caught is genuinely often fresher than what's on the fresh counter, much of which was previously frozen and defrosted before going on display. Fresh and frozen at a supermarket fish counter don't mean what they appear to mean. And on Fukushima, Alaska's own Department of Environmental Conservation has tested its seafood for radiation every single year since 2013. In all those years of testing, they've never found a detectable trace of Fukushima-related radiation in any Alaskan fish species. Not once. You can put that one to rest. So here's what's genuinely still worth buying, and there's more of it than you might expect. First, wild-caught Alaskan and Pacific salmon. This is the complete opposite of everything we've just been talking about. Wild Pacific salmon, sockeye, pink, keta, coho, grows in its natural environment, eats what it was always supposed to eat, and gets its color the way nature intended, from a diet rich in krill and crustaceans. That deep red-orange isn't a dye. That's what a genuinely healthy, naturally fed salmon actually looks like. In British supermarkets, look for the Leap brand. Wild-caught Alaskan sockeye, MSC certified, available at Tesco, Waitrose, Asda, and Sainsbury's. For the most accessible budget option, John West Wild Pacific Pink Salmon contains exactly 2 ingredients: salmon and salt. MSC certified, caught in the cold, clean waters of Alaska and Canada, and available in virtually every supermarket in the country. Co-op also stocks frozen wild Canadian salmon. These are clean products from well-managed fisheries. No synthetic dyes, no chemical treatments, no open net sea pens, just wild fish that lived the way it was supposed to. Second, MSC certified sardines in olive oil. Sardines are one of the most genuinely nutritious things available in any British supermarket. Small fish, low on the food chain, fast reproducing, low in mercury. A good tin gives you around 2 grams of omega-3 calcium from the edible bones and vitamin D. Look for reputable brands carrying the MSC blue tick and avoid the very cheapest budget tins from unspecified fisheries. Both olive oil and spring water packing are fine, just steer clear of sunflower oil versions. And for the pilchard fans, pilchards are simply grown-up sardines. Same fish, same nutritional benefits, same rules apply. The MSC tick is what you're looking for. Third, Cornish handline, court hake and Cornish sardines. British fishing done properly still exists, and it's worth knowing about and supporting. Cornish handline fishing means one fisherman, one line, one fish at a time. Zero damage to the seabed, zero bycatch. Harkey stocks off the Cornish coast actually recovered from their collapse in the 1990s thanks to careful, sustained fisheries management, which is a rare and genuinely good news story in British waters. When you buy Cornish handline caught hake or sardines, you're supporting small fishing communities whose methods have coexisted with the sea for generations. If you want to understand what properly made smoked fish actually is, seek out Arbroath Smokies, a protected geographical indication product that can only be made within a few miles of the town of Arbroath in Scotland, using traditional methods unchanged since the 1800s. Real hardwood fire, no chemical dyes, no shortcuts, no liquid brine injections. You won't find them in mainstream supermarkets, but a good fishmonger can often source them, and eating one tells you immediately and precisely how far supermarket smoked haddock has drifted from what the real thing actually is. Fourth, Fish, said Fred. This is a brand that does something beautifully simple. It tells you exactly where your fish came from. Not the Atlantic Ocean, not responsibly sourced. The specific fishery, Fish, said Fred, is fully MSC and ASC certified across its range and was named ASC UK Brand of the Year. It's available in major supermarkets, and it proves that a commercially viable brand can be genuinely transparent about sourcing if it actually wants to be. If more brands operated this way, we wouldn't need videos like this one. Fifth, your local fishmonger. If you have access to one, there are 2 questions that immediately tell you whether you've found somewhere worth trusting. Where was this caught, and when did it arrive? A good fishmonger answers both without hesitation. If they can't or won't, that tells you something important too. The expertise, the knowledge, and the direct relationship with the supply chain that supermarkets systematically dismantled from our high streets are still out there. The skills didn't disappear. You just have to find where they went. Sixth, bird's eye fish fingers. We're including these with a completely honest caveat, because honesty is the entire basis of this channel. Bird's Eye have been 100% MSC certified across their entire frozen fish range since 2010. By switching production towards sustainably managed Alaskan pollock, they took approximately 3,000 tons of annual pressure off overfished British cod stocks. Their omega-3 content has been independently verified at 99.6% purity. By the standards of what's available in the mainstream freezer aisle for families on a budget, they're the responsible choice and the one worth buying. But here's the honest part. Bird's Eye fish fingers in the 1960s were a meaningfully different product. Thick, generous cuts of real cod with a light, simple coating. The fish content has been quietly reduced through reformulations in the decades since. They're the best option in their category. They're not what they were. Buy them knowing both of those things are true, and look for the MSC tick. Seventh, cold water prawns. The direct answer to the king prawn section is sitting in the frozen aisle right now. Cold water prawns, the small sweet northern prawns from the Barents Sea, Greenland and Canada, are wild-caught, not farmed. There are no mangrove forests being cleared for them, no sodium metabisulfite treatment, no concerning supply chains. They're MSC certified, sustainably managed, and they're the prawns that have always been in your prawn cocktail and your prawn sandwich. You just might not have known it. Look for the MSC blue tick on the bag. They're regularly cheaper than the warm water king prawns they should be replacing, and they taste considerably better too. That's 13 fish products to think very carefully about, and 7 that are genuinely still worth your money and your trust. We hope this changes how you look at the fish aisle, because the fish aisle very much needs changing. If this video was useful to you, hit that hype button one more time before you go, and leave us a comment telling us which food product we should investigate next. We read every single one, because there's more coming and you won't want to miss it. Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, and protect your plate.